Kia ora team, welcome into the Aotearoa Rugby Pod, brought to you by Ashley and Martin Medical Hair Centres. I am Jeff McTate. Hope you've had a fantastic Easter weekend. I'm in the chair today for Ross Cowell. The boss has finally decided to take a weekend off, as he is rightly allowed to do. Joining me shortly, zooming into the pod, Bryn Hall and James Parsons, as per usual. Plenty to get stuck into from across the weekend. Super Rugby Pacific, how good, halfway point of the season, and the competition continues to deliver. Also, the news out in the week that Reiko Ioane is heading offshore to join Leinster, following in the footsteps of Jordie Barrett, so plenty to talk about there as well. Ashley and Martin Medical Hair Centres turning point of the weekend, I think it has to be James O'Connor and what he did for the Crusaders. We'll take a closer look at that and perhaps what that might mean for James later in the season, and perhaps whether he gets back into a certain gold-coloured shirt. Chiefs, Highlanders, the Chiefs running down the Highlanders in the second half of that game. What does it mean for the Chiefs and also the Highlanders as they approach the business end of the season? Are they still a chance at the top six? The Canes in force in Perth. What a game that was. Super point, first super point of the season, first draw of the season. Should the Canes have got out of there with the maximum points? Did they let that one slip? We'll take a close look at that. Also, your emails coming into the Rugby Pod. We'll have the tipping point comp with the boys too, and we'll take a look at their tips for the coming weekend. We'll take a close look as well at Super Rugby Aupiki, the Blues, their dominant season and winning their trans-tasman crossover game against the Tars, and what it's a huge year for women's rugby. We'll also chat to Ruby Tui, who caught up with the lads earlier. James Parsons, Bryn Hall, happy Easter to you both, gentlemen. We'll start with you, Jip. Was a bit of an egg hunt around the house?
There's plenty of egg hunts. My daughter certainly liked to dine out on multiple across the weekend, but no, it was a great weekend had with family down here in Whangamata.
So plenty of sugar, Bryn, and Jippa's household, but I'd say just for you, it's actual eggs, the omelette, the protein, because you're still an athlete, mate. You're still in your prime, still playing.
I still am, Jeff. It's good to have you on the show, mate. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of eggs.
Okay.
Whether it be the sweet or the actual form when it comes to diet. But no, it was great to be able to get to Australia. My brothers living over here, got some family and got some friends over here. So it was great to be able to refresh, and I literally just got back this morning into Japan. So looking forward for the back end of the season. We've got finals coming up. We've got three games before that starts. So yeah, looking ready and definitely refreshed with a bit of a tan, which was the outcome.
Speaking of a refresh, let's start with Reiko Ioane. I know we've talked about this on the pod in recent episodes and the impact that Jordie Barrett has had at Leinster. I'll start with you, Jip, on this. Reek's a man you know very well indeed, heading to Leinster, so much to unpack around this. And Johnny Sexton and what happened at the World Cup and the book, all of that sort of thing. Reiko Ioane, Leinster, good move?
Oh, look, I think it's fantastic. I mean, the one thing I would say, it's a hell of a tip of the cap to Leinster. You've seen the impact that Jordie's had, and as you said, we sort of spoke about a few weeks ago, but I also think it's a courageous move from Reiko. He's definitely probably got another chapter for his book when he retires, because, obviously there's some history there, but no doubt they've had those conversations behind the scenes. And at the end of the day, as we said with Jordie, I think the most exciting thing is seeing these sabbaticals, that it's not all about the money, and it's about going to a club and I suppose a competition that has the potential to make them an even better athlete, person, player, the whole 9 yards. So I think it's well done to Reeks, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how he goes, and really hoping that the Irish fans can get behind him. And I think the biggest thing there is, your only currency as a player when you go into new clubs is performance, and no doubt he'll be focused on making sure that he really does hit the ground running and puts in some early shifts that sort of puts the Johnny Sexton stuff to the side and allow them to get behind him.
You're going to one of probably the best clubs in the world, considering around for outside backs or just, I guess, any positions in general, to be able to upskill yourself. So he's probably seen Jordie and seen how well it's gone for him. And I think, look, he'll be over there and he'll be wanting to do the same and grow his game. More importantly, I think, sometimes being in the All Blacks and I guess being in the Blues for a long amount of time, going to somewhere completely different, they play a completely different style. I think it'd be great for me, and especially with one of him, he probably wants to go to that 2027 World Cup, a new player, and he's going to go to that club, I think, and it's going to take his game to another level in terms of being able to see the game in possibly a little bit of a different way.
Let's get into Super Rugby Pacific. Jip, we're going to start, I have to say, we're going to start with the Blues and the Crusaders, and we're going to touch on that performance by the Blues, maybe just where it perhaps went south for them. Said to Bryn off air, Crusaders of old, the way that they closed that game down, we'll talk about James O'Connor, but the Blues also close, going down by 3 points.
Look, I was quite happy with the performance. Obviously didn't get the win, but I do think they've really settled themselves in terms of their defence. They tackled at 93%. They had more wins at the breakdown in terms of turnovers. The big thing is for the Blues, and I think the positive is their run-in, three sides that are ahead of them, they get to play. So if they can steal points off and get those results against the Tars, the Reds and the Force, we'll still set them up to have that ability to, not just scrape into the finals, but potentially push their way further into that six. But they've got so much possession, so much territory. They've really sorted out their kicking game, but they just haven't been able to convert all that pressure and territory into points. Again, 23% conversion rate in terms of the 22-minute entries coming away with points. And I think that's their biggest Achilles heel, similar to the Canes, sort of dominating games, dominating in terms of where they play the game, but just not having that finesse or, I suppose, a plan C, D or E when they get into that 22. And if they do get shut down through that muscle play, it has led to a lot of turnovers and a lot of missed opportunities.
I guess two things that's been really, pivotal for me and being able to see the old Crusaders DNA is their defence. Look, I think, the Blues played really well. Look, I thought the game was actually a really close fought game, and there's a lot of feeling around it. I don't know if you were able to see it, but very early doors, the Crusaders were pretty animated in terms of, winning little moments, but the Blues they came back in that second half and showed that kind of care as well. So, both teams, it was very, I hate to say it's a bit of a cliche, but, moment to moment, it kind of was that kind of game. And it was really just a scrum penalty in the end and a kick by James O'Connor, who we'll touch on a little bit later, that was the difference in the end. But yeah, the biggest thing for me also, Jeff, is the defense. The defense this year has been a lot better. Now they operate at 90%. And why that's such an impressive number? Because their line speed pressure is quite high. Look, they try and put team skill set under a lot of pressure, and probably the wet dictated that a little bit down in Christchurch, but they've been operating more so in their kind of low 90s or just in the high 80s with that defensive pressure. So I think that's one area that they've done really well. I think, Matt Todd's been in and around that defense for a second year. Ryan Crotty's actually come into that group as well, who is a great brain in terms of being able to bring line speed pressure. So you'd have to think that he's helped within that area. But yeah, I think they've just kind of gone back to where they have in the last couple of years, where they were a few years ago. I think their kicking game has been a lot better. I think Noah Hotham and Taha Kiramata, two young 9 and 10s that have come through, I think game management-wise, are finding their gel a little bit. And I think Noah's been really good in around their kicking execution. So, yeah, I think they've just got a lot of things that was very successful in them back in a couple of years ago around defensive pressure.
I suppose the one work on for the Crusaders and probably a positive for the Blues is their lightning quick ball at 36%, because their efficiency in attack is very strong. Like, they get down there and they just come away with points, and that is the Crusaders of old. Is that something they're working towards? Because it seems, very low. Or is that a tip of the cap to the Blues defence and the work they are putting in around the breakdown? Because I do feel like the Blues have, the last 3 weeks, they've really been able to sort of slow the opposition ball down, and that's allowed their defence to get better and better.
Yeah, I think you've answered it, Jip. I think, you've got to tip your cap to the Blues. Look, I think physicality area, whenever you're playing the Blues, it's really tough to be able to get that lightning quick ball. And probably the Crusaders struggled a lot last year with that game line percentage of being able to get over their advantage. Like we talked on it at length last year. And, on the weekend, the Blues are really good around that area to be able to stop that quick ball. But what I kind of have seen the difference, whereas it was last year, is their kicking game. When you're not having that momentum, you're able to put teams under pressure through the contestable kicks, whether that's through 9, 10, 12, 15, whoever it may be. That's then a good solution to be able to try and, add momentum in a different way if it's not with ball at hand. And then, like I said, defensively, if you can put teams under pressure, whether that's breakdown penalties or being able to make unforced errors, it helps. So no doubt I know that they'll be continue to keep working on that because, you want to have tempo, you want to play at a high speed, which we have seen in parts of this year with the Crusaders. When they get there right, they've got all the attacking, weapons and their animation to be able to get that right.
Let's talk about one of the emails that have come into Aotearoa Rugby Pod from Matt. Guys, before we get to the Ashley and Martin turning point of the weekend, which of course is James O'Connor, and that is the Aussie threat. 4 teams in the top 6 Super Rugby. It's been a while since the Aussies have had a Super Rugby champion. Of course, a massive year for Australian rugby with the Lions in town as well. Jip, can an Australian team, do you see an Australian team winning Super Rugby this year, given the way they're playing? And let's look further down the track as well, guys, at Bledisloe Cup in the international season.
If an Australian side is going to win, I do believe that they'll need to finish top of the table. Like, I think probably the Brumbies are now my favourite in terms of an Aussie side if they have the ability to win, because they've shown that they can win away from home. A great result against the Blues at Eden Park, another result against Moana Pacifica in Pukekohe the other day. And they just are resilient at home. I think it's going to be a really interesting week. I think we'll learn a hell of a lot about the Brumbies as they have the Canes in Canberra. And I think that could be a big statement game, but I still feel the Reds and the Waratahs are fairly inconsistent. And the Force, again, very strong at home, but probably not on the road. So, and a lot of the Kiwi sides that are behind them, and the Blues and the Canes in particular, get the chance to play these sides. And if they can win those, I think you'll see a few more Kiwi sides slip into the 6.
Looking down the stretch for the Wallabies, and what, as we've said, is a massive year for them. I mean, do you see them making strides against sides like the All Blacks?
Oh, absolutely. I think you can only take confidence from, having the belief that you can beat New Zealand teams. And I know the international stage is a lot different, but every Super Rugby team plays pretty similar to how the All Blacks do play. And then if they can do that, they've got a British and Irish Lions team that are coming as well, which is going to be massive for Australian rugby. So, look, I just think the way that they're competing every single week in the really small margins that they are getting right in some games, it's added to the point where, look, most of them are in the top 6. So to come back to Jip's point, though, the Brumbies at least need to be in that top 2 to give themselves a chance in the finals, because we've seen the last couple of years they've finished kind of 4th, 5th. They've been in a semi-final stage where they've had to travel to New Zealand, and they haven't been able to get the job done.
Yeah, I think a lot of questions are being asked too, guys, about Melbourne Rebels leaving Super Rugby Pacific and what impact that was going to have on the competition this year. I think we've seen a lot of the player movement as well has really started to strengthen those other teams. And I think you've got to say also, guys, that Joe Schmidt's had his fingerprints on a lot of those transfers as well. We saw on the weekend against Moana, David Filulai playing in midfield for the Brumbies, and he was encouraged to go and play at ACT by the Wallabies coach too. So there is a plan. I get the sense there's a plan working with the coaches, with the clubs for Australian rugby, which has been in some real strife in terms of experience, guys, over the last couple of years around that Rugby World Cup and the Eddie Jones fiasco and everything that went with that, and not having certain guys who we all know that weren't there at that Rugby World Cup, perhaps that should have been. That's when you ask a question, and we'll look at our Ashley and Martin Medical Hair Centre's turning point of the weekend. A guy like James O'Connor, who, look, I know it's only a kick to win a game in Super Rugby Pacific mid-season, but James O'Connor, yes, maybe it's a stretch to say he'll play at the next Rugby World Cup for Australia, but you look at a one-off kind of year like this for Australian rugby and the impact that he's had already at the Crusaders. You talk about a young player like Taha Kemera, we know the issues he had. James O'Connor, let's remember, had similar expectations, pressure, hype on him when he was a young player and he started out for the Wallabies. And I feel like his career arc has him at a point now where he has so much to offer. We're seeing that not just with the Crusaders, but I think he's still got a lot, Jip, to offer Australian rugby.
Oh, massively. Couldn't agree with you more, Jeff. And the reason being was because I think exactly that. He's had quite a challenging career in terms of, I suppose, peaks and troughs. But the big thing now is there's no pressure on him as such. He's really comfortable in his own skin. He understands who he is and what he's about as a person. And I think that's allowing him to execute under pressure more often than not. And I don't think you can underestimate, if you look at 2011, you look at 2015, though both those All Black sides had some senior statesmen that basically were in there to bring the edge during the week. And whether he can make the 23 or not, it doesn't really matter. I just think it would be a no-brainer. And being a bit short-sighted if he wasn't included in the initial squad, at least to see what he can contribute and what he can control. And let's not forget, Joe Smith's not hanging around after this, so it's all or nothing for him as well. So the World Cup's not such a big focus. I think this year is massive for Australian rugby, and a player like James, just the way he is and the way he can step up and deliver in the pressure situation. And then if we go back to the Burslow, man, he'll be grabbing a lot of intel from the Crusaders and the way New Zealanders play and the way they think about the game. And obviously Joe Schmidt has a lot of that knowledge as well. And obviously, I think the Aussie commentators, Morgan Turanui and a couple of others, had come out and said, look, he's really knocking on the door with these performances. But I think on the weekend, that solidified it for me. And that was a big moment. And it wasn't just the final kick. He played some great, some great plays in and around putting them in that position in the 15 minutes he got.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Jip. And I think, all the things that you touched on are spot on. And one thing that I've really enjoyed with James is the fact that, Taha Kemara, has been really, really good around his growth. Always been able to talk to him in terms of what he needs and being able to help him. And you look at James, well, he's only spoken positively around Taha and what he brings to the squad and what his role and being able to help the team with when he comes off the bench. Because if you really look at Australian rugby behind Lola Seo, there's not really a lot of, tens that are very, very experienced on the international stage. You've got Liner, you've got Edmund, you've got Donaldson as well, who's been in and around there and went to that last World Cup. But if you're talking around guys with experience and coming off the bench and what he's doing, it's a great tool to have to be able to have a guy like James O'Connor in that squad. And he actually can cover multiple positions, you know what I mean? So, and if we do look at probably the last World Cup, we did talk around that they didn't take guys like Bernard Foley, they didn't take, older statements to be able to take them like Quade Cooper at the time, how much they would have enjoyed having that kind of experience in that World Cup, let alone in a rugby championship, and then coming up to the British and Irish Lions series, which you're probably going to need as much experience as you can in that environment. I think it's a no-brainer.
A lot of people asking when James O'Connor was announced in that score, what's going on here? Why is he going to the Crusaders? What's happening? But like you pointed out, Jim, like you alluded to, the guy has made such a difference with a young man like Taha Kemara, and credit to the Crusaders. Congratulations to them. They saw what was in front of them with a guy like James O'Connor. They had the vision and the guts to select him for the squad. So congratulations to them, and it's reaping the reward. So that is our turning point. Ashley Martin, medical hair centre. It is the turning point for many young men around the country. See Ashley and Martin. Right, guys, Chiefs Highlanders, very much a game, watching that one from the comfort of my lounge, very much a game of two halves and pretty difficult conditions, although the weather seemed to sort of be floating around. It was good for the most part, guys, but 13-10, Jip, at half-time. You're Jamie Joseph, you're Ben Smith, you're watching that game, you're thinking, gee, we're on here. And then the Chiefs, 5 second half tries. I'll tell you what, it was a difficult one to watch through that second half. They flicked the switch.
Yeah, they certainly did. But again, as we've seen throughout this competition, some of the tactical decisions, like an Anton Leonard-Brown on the bench, and injecting that experience is just paying huge dividends for sides when it's tight at half-time. And I think what the Chiefs really did well was their kicking game. Their kick strat was, every player from 9 to 15 kicked the ball, and they kicked it accurately. And I think that's the hard thing, is when you're trying to put a side in a position where they can't kick on their terms and get out of their half, it's quite hard when everyone you look at can put the ball, basically on the string and in the right parts of the field. And that balance of that kick strategy paid big dividends, which allowed, I suppose, the Chiefs to put the ball in their half and wait for an error and or a penalty to be able to sort of, set things alight on attack. However, I do think the Chiefs, the question for them is how can they become more consistent defensively? 6 line breaks in that first half to the Highlanders, and the Highlanders look, really, really strong. And they couldn't do it for the full 80, but I think, again, the Chiefs are another side that if they can get their home final and they can tidy up a few things defensively, then every other metric you look at from an attacking sense, in terms of a territory-based game sense, in terms of going into more of a winter, a bit more dewy, a little bit more rain, they are so well set up to make a charge at this title.
To be honest, the biggest thing with the Highlanders that we've seen, we've touched on it a lot, is just their turnovers, especially in crucial situations or just in general. Like you're looking probably in the second half, 16 turnovers. And of the 5 tries that the Chiefs did score, it was based around an unforced error of what the Highlanders did. So, there's been long periods of phases in games where, they're doing some really good things, but then, the decision-making area around what's required at that time They just haven't been able to get it right. And fair credit to the Chiefs to be able to, I guess, to take advantage of those 16 unforced errors from the weekend to be able to score points and 5 tries. So I guess more so ice the game. But yeah, I guess the biggest thing for the Chiefs is we probably saw or last week when they don't get their right is their quick ball, the high turnover rate that they did do the week previously. That could be the only area where I think if they are consistent around that, they could get in trouble. But the great thing about good teams is you don't make the same mistake twice. And, considering that they got their kick straight right, I think they had 43 kicks all up, which is a lot considering the weather definitely did dictate that. But it was the type of kicks, it was the timing of the kicks. They got that balance really right, which was pretty similar to how the Crusaders and what I touched on, their kicking and their exits and how they're kicking on their own terms. The Chiefs Ravs do that.
Speaking of kicking, Bryn, we saw a lot of that in the Force Hurricanes game, first Super Point game of the season, ended in a 17-all draw. Maybe the Hurricanes, Jip, at times guilty of a little bit of aimless kicking. I know that the Force tried to play it out to the wing, Harry Potter, trying to get him involved as much as possible. But yeah, we saw that particularly in that game and the effect it had.
Yeah, well, I think probably for the Canes, though, if you go back to the Blues game at Eden Park, and probably ever since they had that big win against the Waratahs, they just haven't been able to convert territory and possession into points. And there's a number of examples against the Force where simple inside ball pass, instead of going behind the player, goes to the chest, they score. And I think in that first half, they could have probably run away with it and dented the confidence of the Force, but they just kept them in there by not converting once they got into that 22. And I think this is a real challenge for the Canes and the Blues is, man, they are creating so much. They're both so strong defensively. Like, look at that loose forward trio. The work they do defensively in and around the breakdown, you'd have to say the Canes are probably the best at the defensive breakdown in terms of slowing the ball or stealing, and the Blues have sort of got themselves in an order where they're sitting around second and third in the comp in those positions. And then again, they get into the 22, but, they're just leaving so many opportunities out there for points. And again, they still, even extra time, they put themselves in a position to win it. They hit the post, but I just don't think that game needed to come to it. They'd created so much, and it's almost like they get down there and they just want to score it maybe the second or third phase once they're in the 22, whereas if they were just a little bit more patient, and if you use the Crusaders as an example, when I mentioned they had 36% lightning quick ball, they slowed it down, played to the conditions, and just got into that arm wrestle and got the points. And I think both the Blues and Canes' natural instincts their players are based on, X factor and doing things. You just got to use Hoskins Satuti's flick pass, which was absolutely outrageous to AJ Lamb. Both the Canes and the Blues, have that in them, but they've just got to find that risk versus reward and making sure that they're making hay when the sun shines, because I think most of the times, both those sides, they're sort of hovering the last 4 weeks around, that sort of 23 to 30% conversion rate, and that's just not going to win you titles because you're not getting enough points on the board, and then you put yourself under pressure, and that creates stress and anxiety, as the minutes run down.
They get their massive charge down, they could probably possibly even score from that, but, probably don't make the right decision in and around there. They get to a point where, I think Eddie Anadi actually gets to be able to have a little snipe down the short side, and it's a 2v1 and probably just doesn't get the execution right. So that's another opportunity that's missed out from there. And then lastly, the one that really was a tough one to watch is that we've touched on, Jim, how hard it is when you get kind of 1 meter to the line and those pick and goes. All they really had to do was show a little bit of patience, and I think Eddie maybe chucks it to Ruben Love and they're not on the same page, and then they've got to go back to them where they get themselves into position to try and do a drop goal from that. So it's just those small margin areas and crucial times that I think, the Highlanders we've touched on a little bit execution-wise, but I think with the Hurricanes, they're just not getting the right, because you look at the attacking stats, you look at the ability of ball and play, the quick ball that they were able to do for a lot of time in that game. They had multiple opportunities and multiple ways to be able to win that game. But when pushers come in to shove and they need to be able to execute with points at crucial times, they're just not been able to get it where they are. So that would be the most frustrating thing, I guess, as coaches, because, the attacking side of the ball, they're doing some really good things, but it's just that final little bit of polish and they're probably sitting in a different position where they probably are in the top 6, but just haven't been able to get that right probably the last month of footy.
You're at the Trans-Tasman final, the Blues and the Waratahs at North Harbour. Not the greatest of conditions, but what a year! What a year for the Blues women and Super Rugby Aupiki and winning the Trans-Tasman final as well. It was sensational, and they've been so dominant all year. How impressive have they been for you?
Oh, mate, it was such a amazing occasion, an amazing execution. Like before the game, I was on the pre-show and I was like, I really hope they get their kick strategy. They hadn't kicked a hell of a lot, if anything, whereas the Waratahs had shown across the ditch they had a strong kicking game. They really did like to play that territory-based game, and with the conditions, which didn't do a lot for me to, when I always claim that it's always sunny on the shore. But what it showed me is, man, that the courage for them to play that offload game in those conditions, but do it so accurately and efficiently was just amazing. Like the style of play and the execution was world class. And I think the most exciting thing is probably like there is a fixation on the need going into this Rugby World Cup to play a lot more territory because of the way England have played previously and the French. But to me, it almost sort of, I had to eat humble pies. I don't think it's as probably as important as I probably thought before watching this fixture, because the execution of just strong, dominant carries, and this is what I liked about the Blues, is they carried first. They're like, right, we're going to bend this defence. And when they bent it, they still either went to the ground, popped the ball up, or they got a clean offload away after winning the collision. They weren't trying to give offloads that were in the collision that was half won, or even when there was a wall of Waratahs defenders, they weren't looking to shift and shovel the ball to the edge and hope for something. Maya Roos would just tuck it under her wing and run hard, set a ruck, and they'd just be patient in terms of wearing that Waratahs defence down. It was an absolute clinic from an attacking sense, and defensively, they continued their dominance in terms of the breakdown, and Basin is really, I would say, the find of the season for Aupiki. She had another very strong game in the 7 jersey, and is certainly knocking on that door and definitely worthy of an opportunity to get some minutes in the Pac 4 to see what she can do at international rugby. But first Trans-Tasman crossover, I think we'll see a more bolstered crossover system in years to come, but it was a hell of a start, and it was a hell of a, I suppose, advert for the game in conditions that you'd expect it to be 6-3.
And what is a huge year for rugby, for women's rugby, the Rugby World Cup later this year, and hoping to play a big part in that for the Black Ferns. Ruby Tui, she caught up with the lads a bit earlier on.
Ruby, awesome to have you in the studio.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a hot minute since I've been back at Sky, so I'm stoked to get obviously chat a little bit of code with this guy, but to chat live with you guys. It's so cool to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're going to bring a whiteboard in.
I don't bring my headgear, so don't worry, I've been all mine.
The iconic Jiffer shot.
Yeah, right. It's a montage, the opening.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I was thinking about you and what we're going to talk about, I suppose there's a couple of things that come to mind. You're like, larger than life personality, you come in the room and you light it up, but you also love rugby. You love rugby. What is your favourite thing about rugby?
What a great opening question.
Yeah.
Do you know what though? I've been like, I love rugby like my whole career.
Yeah.
And it's been, a minute. It's been a minute since I've been playing. And so I guess as you move on to your career and you get older, you kind of hone in like, but why am I crazy about this? I'm so crazy, and there's so many beautiful dynamic parts of the sport that obviously we could jump into and spend hours talking about. Not the scrum at all. But I have come to the conclusion that what I love most about this beautiful thing is, you work so many hours, blood, sweat and tears, early mornings, late nights, and you're like, this has got to get to something or to somewhere. And then you find yourself in a room or on a field next to all these amazing other people that have sacrificed just as much as you have and worked just as hard as you have. You're not best friends with all of them, but you respect the heck out of them. And even cooler, you are all working towards the exact same thing. And it's this purpose that is way bigger than you. and you get to have fun doing it. Like, it's just the most beautiful gift in all of life that I've ever found. That's why I love it. It's super cool.
He has the same passion.
I certainly do. It's not, I think I love the game because it's made me a better person. Like, it's grown me as an individual from where I was quite stubborn and fixated as a young man, and I knew it all, of course. And then you slowly realise through some experienced people and you know, a lot of great coaches, they teach you a skill set that you didn't have, and then, you know, that growth sets you up in terms of life skills. I think it opens your mind to being always willing to feedback, always willing to get better. And I think that's probably the best thing that I learned, because I certainly wasn't that coachable when I was young. I sort of, you know, was very fixed-minded, and the beauty of this game is you can't be. You've always got to evolve, otherwise you'll get left behind and not selected.
Yeah. What about on the field? Once the whistle's gone and the game is on, what is the thing you most love about rugby?
Well, we can't say winning, can we?
I do.
Well, you can, because let's face it.
You must love working off the ball, because I don't think there's anyone in world rugby that works harder off the ball than you, my mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Smithy and Tony Christie, our current coach, have really been on my back about it. I've learned heaps off Will Jordan. You know, there's ways to do it, and you've got to explore kind of, you know, what you can add to it, 100%. But I'd say things that commentators or, you know, watchers of our game will use the words effortless or magic or, you know, out of nowhere. But as a team, you know, those are actually things that we have spent hours on. We have watched them over and over. We have worked on them, you know, like Ruby, come off your wing there and you popped in here. It has to be there. But if I do that, it's, whoa, look at that, heads up play. It's not. It's working together under pressure after hours and hours of hard work and coming together with that. It's amazing.
Yeah, and you've seen that opportunity open up 30 times at training.
And didn't take it.
Yeah. When you were in the 2022 team and you'd come from 7s to 15s, and you were doing all this work off the ball and you were playing amazing footy, but you were a real newcomer to the game. Like, how was that for you? You had to learn on the fly, but you seemed to do it pretty well.
Yeah, so, you know, the Black Ferns in women's rugby kind of prior to 2017, I'd say it were like the underground legendary, like, you know, you haven't kind of cracked it till you've been a Black Fern, you know, like they were the ones who would just, you know, work 80 hours a week, go win a World Cup, come back, like nothing happened, you know, they were just like, who are these women, you know, like it was kind of like a folk's tale, you know, like the Black Ferns. And so I'd always wanted to be a Black Fern. You know, when I started the Sevens, we were the New Zealand Women's Sevens, and then we were namesake after the Black Ferns, and it was just this, just always had it, you know, back in my mind, like, well, I love Sevens so much. I think it was a catalyst to change the game, but man, I want to be a Black Fern. Like, and I didn't know if I'd ever get that chance. And so 2022 was huge for me because, yeah, I'd been watching. Most of us all started in 15s, had been watching, analysing, still had all my favourite players, still knew the coaches, kind of what was going on. And so it was kind of like, yeah, I get a chance. I get a chance to be in it, to get my cap number, to throw everything I've learned, watched, had half a clue about, well, you know, how well Rubes do you really stack up against it? So I was completely focused that year. Nothing was going to get in my way. I knew, very new to the game. I knew I had all these things, but I wasn't going to let any of it get to me. I was, heck of a year.
If you look at 15s, and I'm sure coming from Sevens, you would have learned a lot in your first year there, but from the outside looking in, if you look at all the Sevens players that have come to the Black Ferns 15 currently or since the last World Cup, it looks like that Sevens game or that work ethic has sort of, sped up the professionalism in the 15s game.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to remember in Sevens we went pro first. So the Sevens program had a good 6-year buffer on what it feels like, looks like, sounds like to be professional every single day. And, it's a dream when you're not, but jumping into that space and you're prioritizing busting your gut. It's different to training before and after work. You always tick the box, you always work hard, but when it's your priority to push as hard as you can in the gym until you just about, are stuck under the bar. It's very different. It's a very different kind of mindset. So, the Sevens were a crucial catalyst to getting the entirety of women's rugby, I think internationally as well.
And since then, you've experienced a bit of life. You've played each year. but you experience a bit of life in between. Whereas in the sevens circuit, I feel like maybe not the same opportunity.
Excuse me. One thing that was a real, really attracted me to 15s was you get to play at home a lot and in front of family and friends a lot. In sevens, it was really difficult to explain, to your friend who doesn't watch much rugby that in Dubai, which is 4 a.m. here, we play a semi-final against the US and it's a big deal. It was, especially back in the days when it wasn't on Sky yet. So it was hard to explain the feeling and the emotion. 15s, we're playing in Christchurch, we were playing in Whangarei, Auckland. It's just so cool to bring everything that has given me so much back to to our people. I think it's a huge connection piece to our people. And OPIC, it's gone now, but that's similar. We get a real connection with the people that we are representing, like the people of the whenua that live there now. Like I remember years ago in sevens doing a coaching clinic in like Abu Dhabi, with all these children, and I'd be like, man, I wish I could do this down at FMG or in Hamilton, and really connect with the people. So in 15s, I think it is this undervalued, underrated opportunity to really get involved with your community.
You see people on TV, and I think when you get that real life presence, and I just think you can always feel when it's a face-to-face, you can read body language, you can feel the care and the passion and the authenticity of what you're trying to do. And I suppose what you're trying to do is, we've all had heroes. There's a reason why we wanted that dream, is because we've had heroes and we want to follow in their footstep. And the more we can keep that alive in New Zealand, we can keep punching above our weight worldwide. And it's such I think that school, and even, I suppose, the primary school age.
Absolutely.
Although they don't understand it, just having that touch point, locks a memory, and they may watch a game. I think, the awesome story about your son has only ever been to a women's female game, so actually thinks that he's not too sure if men play the game. But
neither.
Could you say that 10 years ago? I think it's that face-to-face experience really does grow the game, but also grows the next sort of generation.
And I think kids, they really keep you humble too. I'll never forget one time I took my Olympic medal, and my friend had asked to go into their kids' school. I took a medal, and the kids had, I can't remember, they had reading time or something, and so I had to wait a bit, and I sat on a couch next to another kid, and he's like, oh, what's that? And I was like, oh, it's an Olympic medal. Like, I just, come into shit. And honestly, like, he didn't even let go of his book, and he was just like, oh, he's a bit of a show off, aren't you? And they didn't even care, mate. I was like, this is what I came for. Humility lessons on children's era. Like,
amazing. One of the other things I really enjoy, I suppose, in your lessons on life that we see from Ruby Tui is on your social media, you often took quite a large blurb. So I look at the photo, but I'm like, okay, no, but I want to get to the drop down menu to see what she said with the photo. You're quite introspective. You think deeply about things that are passing through other people's lives, and then they read what you had to say and they go, wow. You're in the books a lot, you just think a lot about elements of your life as you go through the day.
Yeah, thank you for spending that time. I really appreciate that. I think, sometimes it's, a little bit scary or daunting being vulnerable online, but social media is a niggly thing, right? I remember when it first came out, everyone said it won't last. It's a waste of everyone's time. It'll never go anywhere. But I remember very clearly understanding that, especially in women's rugby, we didn't have a lot of resources at the time. I remember thinking, this is a free platform to get directly in front of the faces of young girls and boys. How can we not try and create some sort of positive content in this world of misinformation? And so I've always had that cope up. But social media is what it is, but there are times, especially if you build trust within your brand with people that, check in every now and then, that we can actually talk about really important things or things that can add positivity or an impact to someone's lives. So I have lots of passions. Rugby and mental health is definitely one of them. I think it affects us all. And so I always try and it's impossible to be completely real. You're never going to meet somebody through the online. You can't, people talk about being real or fake. I think that's a really dynamic topic, but there are times where you can share something real and it's just your truth in that moment. And, people can kind of say whatever they want to say about it. And so I try and do that as much as possible. Just chuck out a little bit of what I hope will be positive or thought-provoking and long-term positive out there. And I think I meet really cool people. I think I have really cool conversations. I have family members that I talk to a lot that have got me through, really dark times. I also am really grateful for, in our rugby teams, we have access to counsellors, to psychologists, a huge plethora of resources that I know there are people out there that don't have that. I started reading in lockdown. I'm not going to say I'm an avid reader because my friends will come for me. But I do try and read, and I try and just, same as rugby, everything that kind of I get this gift of, I try and just shove it back out there. And I love people in my life that do the same. Because like Jibba said, we're all just here to grow. The day we stop growing, we don't need to be here no more. It's just a life of learning and growth. And they're just a couple of my learnings.
Do you think that vulnerability, is probably more important than winning a match-winning try? Because I do feel like the strength of vulnerability is almost saying, you're not robotic, you're an extremely successful person, but as you say, we all have things that get us down, and that vulnerability almost provides permission to the community that it's actually okay to, go seek help or put your hand up and ask for help.
Oh, absolutely. And it is, I think, it's not spoken about enough how hard it is to ask for help when you are struggling so much. And so the more we can normalize it and, you're feeling good, you can still, like, even when I'm doing great, I will still text my psychologist and have a catch up. It's totally okay to do and talk about. And I think, it goes for in work, but especially in rugby teams, it's the moments of people, just going, actually, no, I'm going to speak up about this. Something's not right in the team. I'm going to go to the coach and talk about this. I'm going to approach the leadership group about this. I'm not happy. This isn't working. Those are the frickin' moments that win World Cups, that turn your team around. And so it's not only required for our health and our safety, but it creates excellence, I believe.
The one that I read recently that really got me, because I kind of, as a 42-year-old, made me think, I was like, the one about not making friends as an adult.
Oh, right.
I got to the end, I looked at it and I was like, what have I done today? I've woken up, I've chipped away at one of my jobs while doing my other job. I've looked after my son, I've tried to spend time with my wife, and we've got a kitten. Like,
I love it.
Where on earth am I going to find the time to create a new friendship?
Right.
And for people who haven't seen the post, like, 70 hours to make a new friendship. To do that would probably take me 10 years.
Exactly. And when we were 10, it would have taken, not even that long. It would have taken 1 week. One week. Yeah. And now all of a sudden it takes us 10 years. That's huge. We're social beings. There's more things to make us kind of go introverted rather than extroverted. There's little things like that you think about. You're like, whoa, let's just think about this for a moment. I'm being a bit harsh on myself having one friend, there's just moments like that in life.
For adults to look back at themselves and go like that, I was like, that's a cool post. I enjoyed that, because now I'm going to text a friend. You know what I mean?
Cool.
Do something to maintain something or other, because geez, either I've been lazy.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed lying down on the couch when I get home and doing nothing too much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you get that moment.
Yeah, and that was Mel Robbins came out with those stats, and one thing that I read Michelle Obama's book, her latest one, and she talked about this huge concept of remaining open. And I think as a rugby player, especially, sometimes we can, I'm on tour and this is my team, I've got to do that, But I've really noticed myself being like, no, I love interactions with the person who makes my coffee. I love saying hi to someone, talking about their kitten. I love that. So, but it actually, as an adult, especially when we're so driven and focused, to kind of take a moment, remain open, because you never know, you might make a new friend.
Yeah, totally. You've got a cat, Manawa?
Manawa.
Yeah. You weren't considering going with Counties Manukau?
I can get a dog.
I can get a dog.
Counties Heat. I call them Heat.
Just Heat it,
yeah. So, because you just got a kid in Scotty?
Scotty, yeah. Scotty,
nice.
yeah.
Sleepless nights?
You're just that tap in the middle of the night, or you're going to the toilet, and then suddenly the kid bum rushes the bedroom, and you're like, Oh no, now I'm not going to get back to sleep.
and you don't know where it is, and then it just pops out. Oh, jeez. Oh, I love it.
All sorts of trouble.
I love animals.
Let's talk some rugby. World Cup year coming up. Got Laurie O'Reilly, etc. on the way through. From what you learned from the last World Cup, and I suppose it was an exceptional turnaround from the last World Cup in the former year, and where you guys want to build on where you were last year, where do you see the key elements of what you want to do in 2025?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited. Again, we could probably talk about this for a couple of hours, but I think TC is an amazing coach, and it's really cool because he started at FBC, won with Canterbury, went to Matatu, won Opiki, and he's come into the Black Ferns. He's got fresh ideas. He studies other sports. So I think, the things he's been educating us about, it's just super exciting. And like I said, like I'm obviously 22 next week, but I'm growing up, and to have somebody in the environment so refreshing and passionate, I think it's crucial.
Where's the biggest opportunity of growth for the team?
You can hopefully cut this up to if I'm blowing smoke up them too much, but I think TC's attack area, it's going to be something new, which, some could be like, oh, it's a bit late to have something new, but hey, it does work. We had even less time last time, so I think, the new ideas, the key is no one in the world has seen them yet.
Yeah.
So, we've been working on a couple of things, and obviously you've got to be smart about what you're releasing. And lots of moving parts, but I think, some of our attack things will be really cool.
You're on the wing a lot, or on that edge defender spot a lot, and especially, I suppose, in the India tour, Black Ferns got caught quite tight and a lot of pressure on the outsides. Has that been spoken about as trying to spread the load across the field so there's not that constant feeling of being on the back foot?
Yeah, absolutely. There's many areas of the field getting wider, and also our exiting. Like there's times where we love to run in New Zealand. We love to have fun and do really cool stuff, but there are times where we do need to be traditional, and not traditional but smart, and play a bit smarter. We really want to give people something cool to watch and stuff like that. But there are times, I think, this year where we will look at the picture. I'll probably have to listen to a little bit more and not try and, so I think, width and also that back 22 exit.
Would you say the biggest, I suppose, execution of a skill would be communication?
Yeah, I think so. Communication, and also, not just communication play by play, but communication of what are we trying to do here with this picture. It happens all the time. As a winger, we see space back there, and we're calling this, but if the other winger, the fullback, the 10 and the 12 are seeing this, that has to be communicated and understood. It's not a conversation in that moment. It is, this is what we're doing. So, communication 100% would be the word, but so many layers to that. Right?
Well, communication is giving and listening. I'm speaking to myself when I say that.
If you're going to the like, no, I don't.
Active listening is definitely on my gross.
Chip is calling audibles.
My ego is so big, I always wanted to throw to the back just to make.
And opposite wing,
Here I am making about me again.
Oh, yeah. Right. Before we go, this is the last question. We're asking everyone this question. World Cup coming up, the selectors come to you, of course, and ask you to make 3 contributions to the squad. They want you to say a current player, a former player, and a coach that you want to take along with you to the World Cup. Who would you go with?
Former player, I will bring former Black Fern, Lindy Tunu, to really muscle up our breakdowns, our clean-outs, and just she holds real mana about it. Current player, got to take Lou, she's compliments me all the time now. Just her rugby IQ, her calmness as a leader, her direction out there, and I trust what she says on and off the field wholeheartedly. And you can trust those people who don't talk all the time, but when they say something, everyone's listening. Coach, Alan Bunting.
I've not met him. I've only seen him on the television, so I can't say, but he's got a different energy to most other rugby coaches.
You should get him on the show because his aura is actually not what people expect, I think. I think they have thing that they have an expectation of his persona, but you get him in the room and he's quite chill. He's
Yeah.
a little, but then he says really cool stuff. You should really get him on.
Yeah, we should. We definitely should. He's
We'll happily get him on at Greece too.
Yeah, actually, good luck. He's got lots going on. He takes surf school.
yeah.
Lots of kids and that. But he's a good coach, and I think Rules Rugby is quite young in terms of being a professional sport, and he understands campaign footy. Like, it's not just we're trying to win one game here. It's we have 4 years to set this country up for success, in the sport, and it's a long day at the office. But that's how I think too. It's not tomorrow. It's in 4 years on that night.
Yeah.
Are we ready to go? So
awesome. It's been great having you on the show.
just want to say a special mention to anyone out there supporting women's rugby. Means more than you know.
Of course, we also have our picking comp here on Aotearoa Rugby Pod. Currently leading that is Try Time Mark alongside Evan Stevens at the top, Super Scoff 23. So good on you, Try Time Mark, Super Scoff 23. The winner, of course, of the picking comp at the end of the season will get to come and join the show, join Ross Carl, Jip and Brynnig. We'll lay it on for you. We'll roll out the red carpet for you. So that is the picking comp. That is who is leading that. Speaking of picks, guys, let's rip into round 11. Let's keep this short and sharp. $7 I see the Force are paying against the Chiefs, Jip and Mount Maunganui. Fair, I suppose, after how the Chiefs played against the Highlanders. But let's run through your picks. Chiefs Force, first of all, Jip.
Yeah, look, Chiefs for me, look, I acknowledge that's a high price, but the Chiefs at home have been something else, and the Force on the road, haven't been as clinical as what we've seen in Perth. So I think the Chiefs will get that done convincingly.
What do you reckon, Bryn?
Yeah, I'm going to go Chiefs. Look, I think, the Force have actually probably been the best in terms of, I guess, underdogs for this year. We probably didn't pick where they were, but look, they played really well. But I think the Chiefs, in the Mount as well. It's a great place to play, so I can imagine the fans will turn out and it'll be a great performance from the Chiefs getting over the Force.
There's no point even asking you this one, Jip, but I've got to anyway. Blues, Reds, but that is over the Tassie, and the Reds, they've had a great season.
Yeah, they have, and look, it's not a happy hunting ground for the Blues. Look, I think if the Blues are going to be genuine contenders to defend their title, they must win this game. I will pick them, as I always say, but I do think the Reds have dipped in their form a little bit as well, and probably haven't had the dominance at home that we've normally seen. So the opportunity is there for the Blues to really sort of make their mark and make this run towards the finals.
Yeah, I'll copy and paste that. I think, the Reds, I've touched on them, they've had some really good moments this year. I think the interplay with their forwards, when they do get their physicality right, they're a very difficult team to stop. But I just think with where the season is, and I think how the Blues have evolved, I know they didn't get the win on the weekend, but I think the way that they are playing, they've gone back to their DNA. Their kicking game's been a little bit better. So I think, it'll be a statement win for the Blues. And I think for the back at the end of the season, which they're hoping to be, obviously to back up their title.
4:35 Saturday. This is going to be an absolute belter on the shore. Moana Pacifica Drua. It's going to be a fantastic game of rugby. It'll be a high-scoring game. We know that, Jip. Moana, they need the points to stay in the slightest chance of making that 6.
Yeah, they certainly do, and they've just hit a few roadblocks the last few weeks. Obviously, Artie not playing on the weekend, I think, was a big loss for them in terms of their ability to stay composed in the 22, and again, like most sides that lost on the weekend, capitalise on the possession and territory they had. But the Drua, I just don't know. Look, I think it'll be an electric game, but it's hard to back them away from home. They just seem to be a different team. So I think Moana Pacifica will continue that form in Albany Stadium.
You going with the Moana Pacifica there, Bryn?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'll go with him. Look, I backed them on the weekend, actually, so my picks were terrible on the weekend. So I don't even know why people listen to me, to be honest. I don't even think I got one. But yeah, I think Moana.
The Battle of the Deep South, the Southern Derby, Crusaders, Highlanders, riding on the wall now for the Highlanders and Jamie Joseph's side, though. Jip need to win that game. It's huge. It's massive. It always is. Yeah,
and we spoke about it last week. The Highlanders probably got the hardest run in. They're playing a lot of New Zealand sides. And if they are, again, to make the final, they need to win this. But, the Crusaders certainly didn't have it all their own way, but they found a way to win on the weekend. And I just think they seem to... they just know how to get the job done. I think they'll do that again this weekend.
Okay, Bryn's got Crusaders. We don't need to go there. Brumbies, Hurricanes. This is fascinating to finish that wee tour for the Canes, but in ACT, it's a tough road.
I think my head would say you have to back the Brumbies at home. I always struggle to do that, which is a New Zealand side involved. But, for my personal picks, I will back the Canes. But I think it's again, similar to the Blues. If they are going to make this finals run, it needs to start now because both sides are running out of time.
Jiffa Bryn, as always, an absolute pleasure. Great to be on the show and for Ross today. He'll be back for the next episode. You guys take care and we'll catch you down the track next time round.
Cheers, Jeff.
Well, that is Aotearoa Rugby Pod for another week. Thank you so much for joining us, as always. Thanks again to Ashley and Martin for sponsoring the podcast. We'll catch you next time on the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. Ka kite.